one of our theses is we have to help people understand themselves better, right? And through personality tests, etc. Yeah, you understand yourself better, but the reality is the algorithm starts understanding you better, right? And today, what's that technology being used for? To sell you, more sneakers, more sweaters, more shit you don't need. Well, imagine, and again, here's the question, and I'm willing to say, can I think of a way that we can leverage that technology that's there, the genie's out of the bottle, but to help elevate people rather than to just try to sell them shit they don't need? And that's really, what I'm focused on.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Mushroom Podcast. Today on the show, we have Juan Pablo Cappello, who is the CEO and co-founder of Nue Life. What is Nue Life, you might ask? Well, they are a telehealth, at-home, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy program. So when you sign up, they'll send you your little kit with your doses of ketamine and a couple of other goodies in there to help you on your journey. You also get access to their interactive companion app, clinician-led group therapy sessions, one-on-one coaching, and they've had over 20,000 people through their program so far. So if you want to read any of the testimonials or learn more, you can go over to nue.life and check it out. So now let's hear from the man behind the mission. Here we go. Here we are. Juan Pablo, thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Amazing. So happy to be here. Appreciate you.
All right. And you are the current CEO and founder of Nue Life, which is an at-home ketamine-assisted psychotherapy treatment.
Yeah, I'd say we're actually, we define ourselves as a next-gen mental wellness company that's leveraging emerging digital and medicinal technologies to drive extraordinary patient outcomes. And the reason I mention that is we're open-minded enough to lean into psychedelics, look at the research around AI, music therapy, lots of modalities. But what we really realized was the current paradigm for mental health is broken, and we needed a new paradigm. And not surprisingly, Brett, psychedelics are a key element of that. But we don't think it's we think psychedelics are sort of the start of the conversation, to help people reboot, reset. And what's important is everything that happens after. But yeah, we're big, open-minded, very open-minded and open heart when it comes to psychedelics, for sure.
Yeah, I love it. And that's so important, what you just hit on there too, that it's just the start with psychedelics, right? To reboot the system. I think I read something you said, like it's a Control-Alt-Delete for your ego. I love that.
we all get that pinwheel where we just get stuck. Things are bogged down and we just can't figure out how to do it. Yeah, and so it's interesting. I sometimes feel that, we're zigging and a lot of the industry's zagging. We actually don't think that psychedelics fix people or heal people. We think they help people reboot, reset, push things out of the way to allow that deep healing to happen. But, I grew up, and we can talk about this, around psychedelics. And I always say, listen, I've sat in ceremony, since I was, 10 years old, 13 years old, with people who were assholes. And they're still assholes 40 years later, right? They've done a lot of medicine. So, you start asking why, right? And they might have been worse assholes had they not been sitting with the medicine, but they're not doing the work, and, whether it's meditation or psychedelics, I think, I think it's amazing, Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss, people have helped really elevate the consciousness of these technologies, but they're always talking about the hack. And I just don't actually view psychedelics as a hack. I view psychedelics as an amazing tool to Control-Alt-Delete.
Yeah. And then do the real work that needs to be done.
Yeah, because let's be honest.
And really be able to dig in.
If you're stuck and somebody gets you unstuck and the first thing you do is jump back into that hole, guess what? You're going to be stuck, right? So
you might have a slightly different perspective of the hole that you're in, but you're still in the hole.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's go back. Tell me about this, your interesting experiences growing up with plant medicine in Chile.
Oh yeah. So So I'm the old man of the space. My mom went to Northwestern in 1966, got pregnant with me, and courageously decided to have me, and ran off to Chile with the dad, who was a 30 or so year old graduate student. And so I was born in 1967. Some of you might, some of your listeners might realize, Timothy Leary was encouraging, the youth to turn on, tune in, and drop out. And my mom did all of those things. And so I was raised in Chile. My mom was very young, and by the time I was 6 years old, there was a military coup. When my mother gets there, there's a socialist gets elected, Salvador Allende, with all this promise. And my mom gets there and sort of rides that wave as, sort of a young leftist, idealistic American. And, by 1973, that revolution, that socialist revolution had been sort of crushed and the military had taken over. And for different reasons, I began spending more and more time with my grandmother, who was on my dad's side, who was indigenous and a Mapuche Indian. And, she exposed me to those traditions. It's interesting, in Chile, the desert is called the Atacama Desert, but it's actually called San Pedro de Atacama. And why is it called San Pedro? And the Valle de la Luna, the Valley of the Moon, there is where the native peoples of the Southern Cone would actually go and sit in ceremony. And it's considered sort of sacred land for the indigenous people. And so the medicines that the native people in Chile, primarily worked with were psilocybin, mushrooms, as well as San Pedro. And ayahuasca was something that would be sort of traded traditionally. The Pan American Highway in the Americas, I'm not sure if you're aware, but it was like the Silk Road with connecting Asia and Europe. So the Pan American Highway was really the road for thousands of years before contact with the Spaniards, where the local people, the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Mapuches in Chile, would all trade. And what's incredible is, you can find peyote buttons that are several thousand-year old down in Patagonia, right? And you can find ayahuasca, which comes from the Amazonian desert, way up north in Lakota country, in the Black Hills of the Dakotas. So it's incredible that these medicines would get moved around the continent thousands of years before contact. And so I was exposed to those traditions early on, and I just was blessed. My mother raised me as a Quaker. She taught Ashtanga yoga and TM, transcendental meditation. So she was a real first generation hippie from the Americas, and ran off for adventure in Chile and found it. And then my grandmother was Catholic, and respected her native traditions as well. So just a real interesting yin and yang in my household. So
no kidding. Wow, what a cool upbringing. And so when you talk about you were exposed to these medicines, when were you using them, like in younger years, like in ceremony? That's a blank spot for me, and I think that'd be really interesting for everyone to hear. Is at what age in these ceremonies do kids start getting involved in like sitting with medicine?
Yeah, so I don't want to so much talk about me. I'm going to speak in generalities here, but
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so we started a Native American church in South Florida. Number of years ago, way before it was sort of Michael Pollan's book, etc. And mainly because I thought it was very important to allow Native people to, or people who want to support Native people to respect their traditions, hopefully without fear of harassment and intimidation by the government, right? I mean, the reality is, the drug war has really just been an excuse to wage an unfair war on the urban poor and people of color. 80% of people in jail for drug crimes are people of color. And yeah, so we started a Native American church. And what I think our Native American church, like most churches, really believe that the practitioners should, make their own decisions. So we do not have, sort of hard constraints. We don't encourage people to, in these Native American churches, people generally aren't encouraged to, bring their children, but they're not discouraged either, right? Everyone just has to,
Right.
Search their soul and try to find
Right.
what's the right answer for them. And so, not that I recommend it or it's a decision I would make, but, there's lots of people who sit in ceremony while pregnant. And I think ayahuasca, given how violent that experience sometimes can be on your intestines, etc. But, with peyote, with psilocybin in ceremony, with San Pedro, lots of, people who are pregnant think that that's important to, continue to celebrate their traditions and sort of share that with their fetus. And then, I think in a lot of Native cultures, when kids are, starting when they're sort of, well, even when they're nursing, right, they'll sit in ceremony. And then I think there's generally a bit of like sort of when kids get restless and can, complain, sort of 3 to 8, you see very few kids sort of, joining the ceremonies. And then starting like 9, 10 years old, you see kids sitting, usually lying down and sleeping, in the all-night ceremonies, but, sort of getting up for the morning prayer and the morning water and sometimes even singing songs and, sharing the medicine is, again, it's not something that, as far as I know, churches, sanction. But again, the idea with these churches is, you're having a direct connection with the greater power, however you define that. And, you should follow, your intuition as a parent and make, what you think is, an informed decision. So, we believe a lot in these traditions about autonomy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to even to be someone growing up, like a young person growing up and sitting in ceremony and not using the medicine, just to be around it and like watching people heal and explore and connect to that higher power, that's a beautiful thing to experience.
Oh, I often
from a young age, right?
Yeah, and I often will sit in ceremony and not take any medicine. Yeah, just for me, and we can talk about it, especially the peyote Native American tradition of the North. It really grew out of the suffering of contact. These aren't traditions. These were traditions that were lost in the North, and they're really about healing that genocide that occurred after contact. In the Americas, this is not really a point of debate anymore. There was somewhere between 50 to 100 million Native people at the time of contact. By the end of the American Indian Wars in the 1880s, 1890s, the Native people throughout the Americas were down to 5 million. So almost like the buffalo that, there were tens of millions and then there were just a handful. Well, literally people over 400 years after contact had gone from being 50 to 100 million to being about 5 million. And the traditions of the North around peyote were really, reimagining the ancient traditions, but to really help those Native people who had lost their way of life, had been pushed onto the reservations, and were absolutely lost. They started with the ghost dance, which was almost like the Sundance, a 3 to 5 day, ecstatic kind of dance with medicine, etc. And on the reservations, that was considered a sign of potential rebellion, and those traditions were squashed. And the Battle of Wounded Knee, where 300 Lakota or so were slaughtered, was really to send a message that the Bureau of Indian Affairs wasn't going to tolerate a ghost dance. And so what ended up happening was the Native people on the reservations began doing ceremonies in private at night, to really sort of, again, heal, to rediscover their traditions and connect with those ancient traditions, but in a new way. And those are the ceremonies that we're doing now. So just to answer your question, yeah, the reason I don't feel like you even need to sit with medicine is if you're sitting all night, the purpose of where these ceremonies came from was to connect and create community and to pray to this water for healing for yourself, but also for your community. And you're singing sacred songs all night, and you're sharing that fire, that grandfather fire. I mean, what can be more beautiful than that, right? And so sometimes I just feel like, man, I don't need any medicine to see and feel the beauty of this moment. It's a little bit, if you're seeing beautiful sunset, like, medicine might be great to really help you appreciate it if you've missed it. But once you've seen that beauty, shit, you don't need medicine. You just need to be there now. And that's the way I feel with, the joy sometimes I feel sitting in ceremony without medicine. It's great.
Yeah, that's, I really identify with that. I recently did a psilocybin therapy session, and I remember just being like, what a gift when I came out of it. I was talking to my guide, and I was like, oh, what a gift to be able to just be able to go back to this place whenever I want. And I was referring that I could just take the medicine again and go back. And what my guide said was, and wouldn't it be amazing if you could go back there without the medicine? And that was such a beautiful statement that I'm holding on to with him, because it's a great thing to say, right? It really connected me back to, like, he's like, that happened inside of you. He's like, that's there now. You can go back and you can, recreate those same feelings and those same emotions and presentness and love and everything. He's like, that's there now. So, yeah.
Well, I get that. Two reactions to that. One, it's like when Alan Watts said, in the 60s, as a caution to, sort of the hippies and this idea of, staying high all the time. Hey, once you've spoken to God, put down the phone and do the work, right? That's one. But then two, it's so interesting you say that, because at Nue Life, we're working with ketamine to help people reboot, reset. But my mother used to always say, the quality of your life is in direct proportion to the quality of the questions you're willing to ask. And the question we're asking ourselves isn't, hey, can ketamine help people get better? It's, how can we use ketamine to help people reboot and reset? But then, how do we keep people in that elevated state without needing to do more ketamine? So exactly as your therapist said, hey, we know that there is a bit of a shortcut offering more ketamine, more psilocybin, more, right? And I think that's a very Western approach to just think sort of, hey, more is better. It's available. Let's take advantage of it. But I think the more thoughtful approach, and actually where deeper healing is and ultimately deeper connection is can you have one of these experiences and just cherish it so much and figure out ways to go back to reconnect with the experience, but without having to put another experience on top of it, right? It's almost like you had this amazing love affair and it's over, and however you've made peace with that, and then can you just still cherish and reconnect with how you felt? And if you're able to accomplish that, whether it's with ketamine or psilocybin or even sitting in ceremony, I think that can be very, very fulfilling.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's so on your note there of Nue Life helping people get to these places where it is a very Western approach to think that the same way that I would take an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety or whatever else, right? It's a daily thing, right? So and that might be a place for microdosing. That's a bit of a different conversation. Even microdosing you can't do every day though, right? You got to take your breaks and give your serotonin receptors a little rest every now and then.
Yeah, and even there, Jim Fadiman has a very different protocol than Paul Stamets. Jim Fadiman's much more cautious, taking time off, and Paul Stamets, there's some days off, but many fewer. So I agree.
So what, back to that great question of that Nue Life is asking, it's about asking better questions. How do you guys see helping people in the integrative process to have them in for, you guys have like kind of you have a 1 month and then you have like a 4 month.
Yeah, where we're
package.
headed. Yeah, let me just take a little bit of a step back, because the first question I asked myself, and I'm a plant medicine person like you, right? And so my challenge was, and I like the Native American church model. I don't even like the Western medicinal model. That's something, But I asked myself this one question, which was, how can we help with the amount of suffering that's in the world today coming out of COVID? How can we help 1 million people before psilocybin becomes legal? I think people like you and me are, hoping, counting the days for psilocybin, and not that stuff that some other companies are trying to patent and make unavailable, right? I'm counting the days for psilocybin to be legal and to allow me and people in Native American churches to really work with the traditional medicines and heal people.
Right.
But that's 3-5 years away at best. So the question is, how do we help 1 million people before then? So you start thinking about it. Okay, we need to do it legally, that ketamine. The cost when we started thinking about it, $700 to $1,200 for inpatient infusion or intermuscular. Okay, I'm a tech person. So the first thing I said is, how do we lower the cost 80%? So, again, first question, hard question. How do you help 1 million people? Okay, what tools do I have? Ketamine. Okay.
Yeah.
How do I lower the cost 80% to start? Well, I need to leverage technology. I need telemedicine. I need an at-home model. You just start sort of asking hard questions, and, you start getting some answers. Some of the answers have a little compromise in them, but, you have to start deciding, am I going to be a purist, or am I going to really try to have impact, right? Sometimes you can't be both, even though you can always be mission aligned, right? Yeah. And so to answer your question, we started and we said, hey, what's the problem that we're seeing with a lot of these ketamine businesses? Their reoccurring revenue model is more ketamine. And we do not, we think ultimately that's unethical. That's like, having people yo-yo diet, right? You help people lose 10 pounds, you let them crash and burn, they gain it back, and then you send them back to the spa, you give them more ketamine.
Exactly. For knocking on your door a few weeks later.
Right. And for some people that, given the condition, given the trauma, et cetera, you might need to do that for a little bit. And, before you can get them to that elevated place where they can stay. But where we're headed is to, and again, you build this in pieces. So we're a 1 month, 4 month program today. We're ultimately building a 6 month mental wellness program, where the first month is essentially the transformative ketamine experiences to help people reboot and reheal. And then the next 4 to 5 months is all about the integration of the experience and the deep healing. Okay. Then after 6 months, basically they're no longer patients. They're no longer, necessarily under the care of a physician, and they join our mental wellness program, mental wellness club. And that's now they're members, right? For a much lower cost. And that's where they tap into the, digital, virtual community, group therapy, cohorts, music therapy, etc. So it's really this idea that, you help people reboot and reset under medical care. You do the integration for, 4 to 5 months under the care of medical professionals. But, what we're hoping is to graduate people. Because the big problem in mental wellness is we have a paradigm that isn't really focused on healing. It's focused on more therapy, lifetime therapy and lifetime drugs. I mean, what kind of healing? If you have to do something for the rest of your life, how's that healing? You're just, substituting one problem for another.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that's a winning model. So in that first month, that's when you're doing, like, for the 6 month model, we'll just stick to that. You do all of that ketamine in that first month. So how often can you do the ketamine sessions in that first month?
Yeah. So obviously that's a decision that the medical doctor is making, right? So we're facilitating the connection. We're giving the patient and his or her physician, the tools to seamlessly offer these therapies, et cetera. But ultimately, the standard of care is being decided by the doctor. But in general, it's 6 ketamine experiences the first month. So what we normally find, the idea is to help people reboot and reset ketamine experiences. We're not interested in sending people to the moon. So, sort of an hour and a half experience. Ketamine, what's nice is the come down's quick. So, normally within, an hour after the experience begins to wane off, people are very clear-headed. If not, with their heart quite open. And so, what we find for most people is the initial course of treatment with the ketamine is 6 experiences, 2 experiences a week for the first couple of weeks, and then 1 experience a week after that. That's roughly where it shakes out for most people. And then what we find is you really need, our view is you really need 4 to 5 months of work around integration to lock in sort of that meaningful change, right? And that's where you have a lot of tools. I mean, you mentioned not having to, as your therapist said, or your facilitator, your guide with the psilocybin, like, are there ways you can connect with the experience without doing more psilocybin? And so our view is, if we see that, if we see through digital phenotyping that somebody after the ketamine experience is doing well, they're self-reporting, they're less depressed, they're sleeping well, because we see that, with their Apple Watch, their Whoop, they're exercising some, and they're on their phone a certain amount. If suddenly we see the person is sleeping less, exercising less, and is on their phone a lot more, I mean, we can see they aren't doing well, right? So there's lots of things we can do. One, we can just send them, the AI can just send them a text saying, hey, this might be a good week to talk with a therapist. Here's 50% off. But also we can say, hey, we see you haven't been sleeping well. Here's the intention you set before your ketamine experience, before one of your ketamine experience. Here's the notes that you took afterwards. Here's, some pages from your integration journal that you might want to reflect on. Here's the playlist that you enjoyed the most of all the playlists you listened to. And so you start thinking about that the same way, like when you walk into, you could walk into a room and it would smell just like your grandmother's house, and you'd be like, you'd have that wave of memory. Well, it's sort of the same thing. Like, how can we find these cues for your psyche to bring you back to that sort of happy place after the ketamine experience, where you were in the afterglow of the experience, without having to shoot you, have you send you on another journey, right?
Right.
And so those are the kinds of tools that we're building. Not totally built there. You build this in pieces. We're all about the analytics. So we test things, we test things to make sure they work. We have intuitions, but the one motto of the company is strong opinions loosely held. So, we think we know a lot of things, but we need to have data to really test them. And that's what we're doing today. So we're building a lot of that out today.
Yeah. I love the accountability built in through tech there. That's very cool. And it just made me laugh a little bit, because it was last night. I was looking for something I wrote down somewhere, and I was in I got a stack of 6 old journals sitting beside me right now. And it's like, before I went into my psilocybin experience just about a month ago, I was having all kinds of problems in my life, and I was looking through this whole journal, and I found something that I wrote, and I was like, shit, I wish I could have read this like back when I was in my spiral. I'm like, man, like I had a perfect reminder here of like who I said I was going to be. And I just like haven't, and that's a great thing, is to remind myself to, when I'm down, just dig into old journals and start reading, right?
Right.
But having that notification that comes through is amazing.
Here's the thing. Listen, you're quite evolved. You're interested in the space. But, what we're also cognizant is we're trying to build a solution and tools for people outside of this bubble. I mean, for somebody who feels stuck and doesn't know what to do, somebody who... antidepressants, like most people, haven't worked for, right? They're treatment resistant, and they don't have any good alternatives, and they're actually not looking for psychedelics, right? A housewife in Dayton, Ohio, who does, isn't around a community of, people who've gone to Burning Man, or a veteran, or somebody economically disadvantaged, sort of urban poor, kind of person. But the idea is, how can we turn the phone? So rather than having 6 journals and having to go through them, can we leverage AI and technology to sort of serve up sort of what you need before you? I mean, for me, where we're successful, or when we're successful, is when it almost feels like magic. You know how you might have an intuitive friend who just sees you're down and doesn't have to say anything and just gives you a hug, like when you most need it, or finds a moment to meet you for coffee and just looks in your eyes and says, Brett, how are you doing? And you're just like, oh my God, this person, I needed that. And so the idea is not in a creepy way, but, if we can leverage AI and technology, et cetera, to give you, to make it, to help, because if we can tell that somebody's beginning to trend down, well, can we intervene quickly to keep the person from spiraling down, right? And in that case, can we find things in their journal that they've shared that they seem to go back to? So even when they've forgotten about it a year later, the AI doesn't, you don't need to figure out, oh yeah, that's in my purple journal, the, third, the third tab about 3/4 of the way down. Where the hell is it? Here, I found it. It's like, imagine if the AI could have just served that up to you right when you need it, right? Yeah. And those are the kinds of, tools that I keep challenging the team to build and think about. And we're getting there. I mean, it's incredible if you ask yourself better questions. How you can really challenge yourself to come up with great solutions.
Yeah, it all starts with better questions. I liked your distinction there of not in a creepy way, because I definitely have some friends that would be resistant to this type of thing. Because everybody's like, oh, I won't have an Alexa in my house because it's listening to everything I say. And we've all had that experience of you talk about something with a friend and then you get the ad served up to you right away, which is the creepy way of technology, right?
But so, for instance, and I totally agree, and that's a challenge, right? But a few things. One of our theses is we have to help people understand themselves better, right? And through personality tests, et cetera. Yeah, you understand yourself better, but the reality is the algorithm starts understanding you better, right? And today, what's that technology being used for? To sell you, more sneakers, more sweaters, more shit you don't need. Well, imagine, and again, here's a question. And I'm willing to say, can I think of a way that we can leverage that technology that's there, the genie's out of the bottle, but to help elevate people rather than to just try to sell them shit they don't need? And that's really, what I'm focused on with the company. And so, look, I think it's totally different. The AI doesn't have to go to you and say, do you realize you haven't slept, you haven't been exercising, and you're on your phone too much? That's creepy and unhelpful. On the other hand, if the AI just out of the blue, offers you 50% off the therapy session and, offers up, says, hey, you haven't been sleeping well, and, offers you some snackable content, which, and again, the AI may know that you like, snackable content in the form of, music. And I react well to more long form, articles. Well, you know what? It's going to offer you what works for you, and it's going to, over time, offer me what works for me. And I don't view that as creepy. I think, it starts feeling like intuitive. And that's ultimately what we want to accomplish, this idea of personalized. Because again, you like to journal. Some people may not be journalers. They like to, just record, right? Or some people, that isn't their thing at all. And, they want to, they just want to focus on their, the playlist or, whatever it is. And so the idea is, can we leverage technology to give people a much more personalized experience?
Yeah. I mean, I've always been a big proponent that, technology is just a tool, the same like social media is just a tool. AI applications are tools. It's how they're used, which dictates whether it's creepy or damaging to us or extremely positive, right? And yeah, we went the wrong way with social media AI. That's very clear now that we're all just a product of these free social media sites that we've been using for the last.
If you're not paying for
years.
it, you don't realize it, but you're the product, right? You're being sold.
Exactly. Yeah, somebody's got to be the product, right? Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah,
crazy.
but you actually just touched on something also about technology, and when we started. We have some incredibly mission aligned and extraordinary therapists, right? And they're very you mentioned technology and sort of leveraging AI, and they bristle. What do you mean we're taking the human touch out of this? I get it, and I have that same resistance. But the point I made to them is I said, okay, well, how much do you charge an hour? A lot,
right.
That now there's a big accessibility issue. But two, I said, you're extraordinary. You're the top, 0.25% of therapists. My question is, could we leverage technology to help a well-intentioned but less intuitive, less extraordinary therapist elevate their standard of care, right? So it isn't always, you just hand off. Like it isn't, my view isn't, you just create, artificial intelligence and now there's no more human. But it's almost, the best chess player in the world is a human playing in conjunction with a machine. I don't know if you know this. It's sort of humans third, machines second. The very best is humans with machines or machines with humans. Okay. Right? And so my view also with technology is, can we use technology to help elevate a whole cadre of therapists who were operating at this level, but now leveraging technology, they can be operating 20, 30, 40, 50% better at a lower cost, right? And so that for me becomes a win-win. I just mentioned that because I think, especially in the psychedelic space and people like me who come from a more, Native American, we sometimes get very caught that, hey, there are these traditions. We don't want to, interrupt them. We have to be true to them. Technology, should be something, is an anathema to these traditions, and we don't want to use it. And I do think there is this ability to sort of marry the two in a way that, is in service of the greater mission here, which should be, to expose these technologies and these experiences safely, effectively, and ethically to a broader part of society.
Yeah, and cost effectively. That's such a huge thing for people, right? I was just going to bring up, we're 2 years into the pandemic here. So many people have moved to remote work. We're doing this podcast over our, Riverside recording software, right? And so everybody's so used to it. And I have a bunch of friends, and myself included, have used a service for online counseling as well, right? And that's become a standard. That market's exploded. So people are ready for it, and people have just accepted the idea. I remember maybe 3 months into the pandemic, everybody was freaking out about Zoom, but now it's like, okay, this is what we're doing.
Well,
there's a bit of an acceptance.
A dear friend who, their therapist and, paying, Miami rate, $600 an hour. And then when I realized she was doing it online, and I had that same reaction. I'm like, what do you mean you're spending that online? That's crazy. Yeah. And then a month later, she's like, oh my God, I've had some amazing breakthroughs. I'm saving myself. I'm so much more compliant. I used to cancel half of the appointments because, I couldn't get there, whatever. And now I'm so much more compliant. I'm getting more out of it. And it really changed, again.
Yeah.
Strong opinions loosely held. I thought I had a strong opinion that teletherapy was not going to work. And, you get more facts, you get more data, and you realize certain things you didn't think would work can actually, drive a lot of good.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't mean that just because teletherapy is now a part of your life that you should cut out the in-person side. Like, a lot of people that are using this, I always talk to everybody about just looking up your local therapy or psychedelic therapy group. There is one in your town. There's an amazing website that I found on the Canadian Psychedelic Association. It's like a global map of like every psychedelic association.
That's amazing.
It's so like, and that's for psychedelics, but there are those out there as well for different group therapy. So take what you've learned from teletherapy and take it to your local group, right? And start a little meetup. Like, they're there. And that's another great thing with technology. Technology is still bringing us together on the local scale, right? To find communities.
Technology doesn't have to divide us. It's how we use it and how we let it use us, right? And but no, what you just said is so true. I'm here in Aspen, and there's a weekly local integration group. And as you know, some people sit in ceremony with, especially I think with ayahuasca, and it can be untethering for some people. And often if you do traditional ceremony all night or whatever, you might do a sweat lodge in the morning or something. But then it's you're sort of back to the real world, and that transition can be tough. And even in a small community like Aspen, there's an integration group, and not just people integrating psychedelic experience, integrating therapy, integrating their new reality, this COVID reality. Yeah. Very, very powerful. Yeah. But that sort of online, offline model, I think is the future. I hope it's not the fucking metaverse, and especially if not Mark Zuckerberg controlling that. But
the metaverse. I don't know about tripping in the metaverse. That seems scary to me. I'm not sure if I'm ready to walk down that road myself, but who knows? Maybe that'd be kind of cool. I'd have to spend some sober time in the metaverse before I was willing to cross that one.
I'm willing to live in a hybrid existence, and I think that's that actually, I'm fairly optimistic about that hybrid.
Yeah. Oh, the real world's just too cool, right?
Yeah.
To be able to feel, and who knows where VR is going to go, but I don't know. I like spending time in the real world.
Yeah, well, what I will say is going back to, sort of psychedelics, et cetera, there's a number of companies doing some really interesting, brain, one's called Brain Tap. There's a number at, I wish I would remember the name, at the Microdose Conference in Miami, one of the companies. Yeah. It's interesting. I sort of thought, they'd put you into a sort of a virtual world. It would be a trippy experience. But it tends to be, your eyes closed, music or not music, more like tonal sounds, almost like sound bowl-y kind of sounds. And then, lights flashing.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is the light thing.
Yeah, and it just, I know I actually heard somebody on, I think, your podcast chatting about it, or maybe you were chatting that you only could do it a few seconds, or somebody said, I think, that they could.
No, it wasn't me. I've never tried it before.
Oh, okay.
No.
Somebody, I heard, maybe I'm getting my signals crossed. But yeah, for some people, it's sort of too intense, but it's very interesting because during the experience, it's very different than a psychedelic experience. But when you sort of step out of the experience, you're like, holy crap, I went very deep somewhere, not quite sure where. Whoa. But that took me to an extraordinary and out of ordinary sense of consciousness or state of consciousness. Wow. So yeah, very interesting.
And that was Brain Tap, you said?
Yeah, one's Brain Tap. I'll maybe you can put it in the show notes. I'll get the one that was at the Microdose Conference. It was pretty extraordinary. They have a whole bed and very, very interesting technologies.
Yeah, that's cool. So back to the ketamine therapy.
Sure.
I just had something come up there because you mentioned that the target market is treatment-resistant depression, people who are stuck, right? Like people who have tried had a pretty good go at some different therapies or antidepressants. But what about for people that are just kind of, looking to elevate? Is that if you know?
100%. Yeah. So
Could you come and use it?
yeah. So the distinction I was just trying to draw is we didn't build this company for the burner crowd. I love the burner crowd. I go to Burning Man. I was at Onda Linda. I love festivals. I like to dance.
Yeah.
But my view was in this space, a lot of companies are being built for the psychedelically interested and the psychedelically experienced. And I think that's great. Right. But my view was, again, I started, how do we help 1 million people before psilocybin becomes legal? And my view is, well, first we need to be able to speak to older females. Why? Because older women over 40 are being prescribed antidepressants at 4x the rate of men. So,
wow.
We could debate why that is, and it isn't just because that demographic suffers from rates of depression at 4x the rate of men. There's, I think, an issue around overprescription. But, my first thing was, hey, we need to get out of the bubble, out of this, psychedelically interested, sort of burner crowd bubble. And the question is, how do we market to, an older, woman who's 50, who's dealing either with, childhood sexual trauma, loss of a loved one, menopause, or just life. And how do we message to that person and let them know that there's alternatives there other than talk therapy and a lifetime of antidepressants? Then also veterans and the urban poor, right? And so we started this company. It's the whole founding team, people of color and women. We started as a public benefits corporation because we really wanted to signal that we were trying to open up this conversation to a much broader audience. So you ask about treatment resistant. So we absolutely will work with healthy normals, but people who are facing, challenges, and that's the decision to prescribe or not prescribe is the doctors. And I can tell you, it's not single, it's low double digits, the percentage of people who actually get prescribed ketamine. So this isn't, a situation like, when early days of medicinal marijuana, where, it was a 99.999%, prescription rate. Yeah. This is, low single digits.
Right.
That being said, we are working with treatment resistant because our view is, as a public benefits corp, we want to do the most social good possible. And what our data shows, and this is where we're also very unique, is that we're capturing the data. So we've worked with 2,000 patients, 17,000 ketamine experiences we've facilitated. Of the treatment resistant, we captured the data, and this is being published on 650 treatment resistant patients. That means they've tried at least 3 antidepressants and no improvement of their symptoms, or they had negative outcomes.
Right.
Of those, 65% of those patients with 6 ketamine experiences had a 50% reduction of symptoms, which is extraordinary. Wow. 50% reduction of symptoms is what's considered clinically significant, and that's a gold standard. And so we're getting about 60% of our treatment-resistant patients getting that gold standard of benefit, and another 20%, so about 80% total, with clinically measurable improvements. These are the toughest patients that, basically Western medicine is out of bullets for. And those, unfortunately, are often the people who end up turning to alcohol, fentanyl, and really get themselves into huge problems because Western medicine doesn't have something to offer them. The question is, and we're publishing that data, in a scientific journal in the next few weeks. But again, the question we ask ourselves, better question, better outcomes. How do we keep those patients? Great, pat ourselves on the back. We help somebody reboot, reset. They're doing better. Guess what? Most of those patients, unless we help them do the hard work, 6 months later are going to be back where they were. And I don't want to have a business where a reoccurring revenue model is the de facto default is more ketamine. So with those patients, we're extremely proud of the work that our protocols are doing to get those patients out of their hole. Now, and I was just on we do a weekly call with our team, and I was saying 2022 is about measuring and figuring out with those patients how do we keep them in that elevated state?
Yeah, that's everything. That's the whole point of why you're doing it in the first place, right?
Absolutely.
And yeah, so after these 6 treatments where you're getting this, what was it, 65% in reduction in symptoms, how long after, like, have you had check-ins with anyone yet?
Oh yeah. So on the digital app, the nice thing is, we can do, mood tracking. We can, if the patient gives us access, we have this digital phenotyping, we're capturing data, and, we're getting better and better at doing that. So these patients, the initial outcome is, sort of a week to a month out is when they're being measured, right? And so we know, and again, those patients haven't had, been able to, step outside of their depression or their anxiety or their trauma for years, sometimes decades. And those people are so grateful. But again, we're going to continue to measure them, work with them, and understand that, some of them, a percentage of them, and it could be a majority of them, start to trend down. And our work is, offering them different modalities that don't involve ketamine, as your therapist or your facilitator said, to reconnect with the experience. And what other things can we offer them? Is it group therapy? Is it creating cohorts? Is it music therapy? Is it breath work? And it's what we're going to find is it's not one size fits all, right?
Right.
And so the better we know our patients through personality tests, the digital phenotyping, et cetera, we can offer more, tools which are more likely to land with a specific patient. And then we just, the more patients we have, the better data we have, the better our protocols become, the more personalized they become. And it becomes this virtuous circle that, I'm interested in. We've worked, as I mentioned, 2,000 patients in less than a year. Next year, I want to work with at least 10,000 patients, not only to improve the lives of a significant percentage of those 10,000 people, but really because that allows me to refine my protocols much faster. And, I'm at version 1.0 now. I need to get to version 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0. And believe me, each version there is going to be a lot better than the marginal improvements you see on the iPhone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want these to be big
steps.
Big steps of healing and improvement. But the only way we get there is data and accepting the fact that a lot of things we think we know, we don't know. So for instance, we may find that, so we have about 20% of those treatment-resistant patients who aren't really getting much help, right? And for me, is the glass 80% full or 20% empty? Both. And so, we may find, the typical advice any thoughtful person in psychedelics would say is, hey, don't, do the experience when you're rested, when you're not triggered, when you're in a good mental place. Well, guess what? We may find that people who are dealing with certain kind of childhood trauma, the best time to do the ketamine experience is when they're tired and when they're triggered. Right. And that's very counterintuitive. But guess what? If we have enough patients, we can start, we're not going to tell people do this when you're triggered. We're not, doing A/B testing and
right.
But if we're capturing data and, and people are obviously deviating from the standard protocols somewhat, and we can't, control for that 100%. Well, guess what?
Right.
If we start seeing patterns of results, then we dig into, okay, why are these people getting well when these other people aren't? Or why were they not improving and suddenly they improve? What caused that breakthrough? And guess what? You're going to find correlations that you didn't expect. And I think one problem in this space generally is this sort of psychedelic exceptionalism. People do psychedelics later in life. They have huge revelations. And now, whether it's God or the universe, something has spoken to me and given me this knowledge that now I'm sharing. Well, we're coming at this from a much more humble perspective where, we have ideas and hypotheses that now we're going to test them, and we're going to capture, we're going to be analytical and capture data and find out that 20, 30, 40% of what we thought we knew was wrong. The problem is I just don't know what that 20, 30, or 40% is. So I need some data to help me figure that out.
That's great, man. I love to hear that you guys are coming in humble and just like not afraid to look at the data and make decisions from that and kind of throw anything else out the window that we know about the human brain or psychedelics and how they function, because the way that psychedelics function in the human brain to someone who did them in the 1950s might not be the same as someone doing it in 2022. The world is so different. Our experiences are so different, right? So, and it's very much like an internal, personal experience that happens when you take some plant medicine or ketamine or something.
Yeah, no, there's so many variables. I think in general as an industry, we need to just be a little more humble.
Yes.
Because what's with the problem, even with, you mentioned microdosing, when something becomes sort of a panacea, right? A little bit the way CBD was a few years ago. Right. Great for cancer, great for sleep, great for, I remember I said to somebody, whatever, I'm having a problem with my skin, and are you doing CBD? And I'm just CBD. Like, we just... It's just obviously we're setting ourselves up. We're creating unrealistic expectations, and thoughtful people outside of the bubble are going to look at that and rightfully say, these people are being unrealistic. The world doesn't work like that. And
we're setting ourselves up for disappointment too.
Yeah,
right?
and why? Why? Because the reality is these tools are so powerful. Why don't we just be a little more sanguine and careful about, I like to under-promise and over-deliver, right?
Yeah.
So I like to, I don't tell people, oh my God, when they're going into ceremony to sit, with an amazing shaman and sacred family, I don't say to them, this is going to change your life. There's going to be before and after this moment. The beauty you're going to see, the connection, you're never going to felt something quite as deep and as powerful. I don't say that. I'm expecting that could happen, but I don't tell them. I just tell them,
you got to let them figure that out for themselves.
Don't Google anything. Go into this with an open mind and an open heart. Know that it's a safe container. Know that it's set up to allow you, to feel what you need to feel, and just experience it and tell me later, and don't tell me the next day. Tell me a month later, 2 months later, 6 months later, how that experience has, how's that experience helped you or not helped you. That's what I do. And I think in psychedelics, we need to just do a little bit more of that and stop sort of, this hyperbole, because we're setting ourselves up for failure.
True. Yeah, I resonate with that as well. Little concerned of seeing people talk about the magic pill, but it's not that.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? It's like we're almost doing in psychedelics sometimes, what Big Pharma, what we're so pissed off Big Pharma did with antidepressants, etc. Like, oh, you have this problem, microdose. Like, the number of people have said to me who don't know my background, like, oh, you should microdose. It's like, maybe.
Yeah.
I suspect as we, look at the protocols, we're going to find microdosing, not surprisingly, is good for some people and for certain situations, and not particularly.
But it's not the full. It's not the full conversation, right?
Yeah.
That's what's missing. Is like it's not just about microdosing, and you go on the Stamets protocol and life's sweet all of a sudden. It's like there's going to be things that come up from microdosing or awarenesses that develop that help you in your day-to-day life understand why you feel certain ways about certain things, and then you can do the work and integrate from there. It always just comes back to work and integration.
Unfortunately, I just say hey, the ketamine can put away some roadblocks that will actually allow you to do the work. I totally get it. Sometimes, you get stuck in these patterns of thinking and you just can't get out of them long enough to do the work. And I get that. Unfortunately, a lot of people have had difficult lives or, just are wired a certain way. And whether it's ketamine, MDMA, psilocybin, ayahuasca, San Pedro, ibogaine. They're different tools. But for a lot of people, there's that afterglow that allow them to do deep work.
Yeah, that's it. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, unfortunately, even in the Native American church, I love it. But, traditionally, in the South, in the traditions of the South, you would often do it as part of a 5-day sort of festival. So the tribes would come together, the people would come together, and it's sort of 5-day, 5 days of a festival. And, there might be ceremonies the first couple nights. So there is this natural integration that's going on afterwards. Which, you don't often see, if you're just sitting in ceremony on a given night.
Yeah.
And, most people
definitely
can't jump on a plane and do a week retreat in Costa Rica, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah, we need alternative options. And I think that what you guys are doing is a really cool forward thinking, and just the fact that you've had a lot of success working. You had a tech incubator down there in Miami, right? That you started up.
I built, my background is I built the first fintech in Latin America, the first online bank. We sold that,
wow.
We were very lucky and sold it. But yeah, I built that because, when I was a kid, my grandmother, who was a pensioner, didn't have any money, would have to spend, every other Friday taking a bus to downtown Santiago, wait an hour or 2 hours in line for her to pick up her pension check. She'd buy me an ice cream, then would wait another hour or 2 hours to deposit it. And so I just sort of thought, how can we build, leverage technology to help people like my grandmother? That was the first company, but, that sort of showed me, hey, you need to be rigorous with technology and measure things and hold yourself and the company accountable. It's really, that's the approach that we've adopted here. There's a lot more at stake. We have a once in a generation opportunity. My family's a victim of the drug war. I just want to, leverage this moment that we've literally been waiting 50 years for, to do good and not screw it up the way we screwed it up with cannabis. The unfortunate thing in cannabis is we, at the height of the drug war, because of, I think, the irresponsibility in the space, and, I've been in cannabis as well, we still don't have federal decriminalization. And so at the height of the drug war in 1992 under Bill Clinton, we had 2.2 million people going to jail every year for drug crimes, mainly people of color and almost everyone the urban poor. Today, this year, 2.1 million people will go to jail for drug crimes. 2.1 million lives destroyed, communities destroyed, etc. And so, my concern in this space is really, how do we have grown-ups like you, people, much, mission aligned, much more skeptical about some of the outrageous claims in the space, sort of leading the conversation. So hopefully, we aren't in a situation where, some people being irresponsible in the space cause a backlash, and suddenly now we have to wait another 20 years to have an opportunity to bring these technologies and these medicines to to the mainstream. Because the reality is, when you have 1 out of 5 women over 40 needing to take an antidepressant on any given day to get through the day, we have a big problem. And that's really, a big motivator as to why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, you got a beautiful mission and an amazing story to back it all up. And I might classify myself as a healthy normal, but I'd love to sign up for
life has happened to all of us. Life
true.
Life happens.
Could be a different story tomorrow, right?
Exactly.
You never know. Thanks so much for coming on today.
No.
This is a great conversation, man. This was super fun, and I learned so much from you. And it's really refreshing and super grateful to see people like yourself working in this space and pushing forward with just a real, like, true heart-centered approach. So,
well, thank you so much. I have my grandmother and my mother to really thank for exposing me to just so much non-traditional experiences as a kid, and I just wanted be of service in this unique moment that we've had to wait 50 years for. So yeah, we're operating Florida, Texas, California, Colorado, Washington, New York. We're rolling out 15 more states by the end of February, and our goal as a public benefits corp is really to maximize our social impact. So we really want to work with veterans organizations, the urban poor. We are having conversations with groups that are helping recently people who had been incarcerated who are reintegrating into society. Just groups that have suffered trauma. We really want to work with. So again, absolutely love working with people like you, Brett, healthy normals who want to optimize and get over what's holding them down. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But we also are very, very focused on thinking about how to get these technologies to a wider audience, and particularly people who've suffered trauma. So anyone who has ideas, etc., please look us up, Nue.life, and my email, jp@nue.life. So easy to find.
Just giving up the email.
Yeah. Just look me up.
Hit them up.
We're here to do good. So
that's awesome, man.
Yeah, we're here to do good. So anyone who this resonates with, please reach out, and really appreciate everything you're doing, getting the word out. These are the kinds of conversations that move the whole industry and the healing forward.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much. Well, that's it for this week's episode, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate all you guys being here on this educational journey with us all. If you want to continue your education around the art, science, and business of psychedelics, I highly recommend you sign up for our newsletter. Just go over to dailymushroom.co, pop in your email, and every Friday you'll get a newsletter straight to your inbox that keeps you up to date on everything happening in the world of psychedelics. You can also follow us on Instagram at dailymushroom.co and TikTok at dailymushroom.co. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you on the other side.